Are Wednesday, July 10th, 2024, Board of Douglas County Commissioners' third budget hearing day. So thank you for being here. Have on our agenda today, we have for 9 o'clock, we have Economic Development Partners. At 9:30, we have Heritage and Land Management. 10:15 is Infrastructure, and 11 o'clock is Law Enforcement. So for this, I think for Economic Development, I think Jill, you're going to get us started. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner Willie. Good morning. I'm happy to have at the table with me just a couple partners that I'll let introduce themselves that are the two agencies that have supplemental requests. And then I know that we have our other economic development partners that are here as well that I'm sure will be happy to stand for questions. The agencies that are at the table, though, I will just represent organizations that are really important partners in one of the roles that I play at the county, and that's the Entrepreneurship Community Coordinator, e-Community Coordinator. That's our partnership with Network Kansas, whereas we are able to support the development of a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem in Douglas County. The way that we do that is through partnerships. I really lean into the role of being the coordinator, and I can't coordinate without partners that help do that work. I'm really excited that we have Holly Joyce with us today from the Eudora Chamber of Commerce. She's here to introduce herself and talk about what her leadership looks like at that organization after a few years of ups and downs. And then I'm really grateful that we have Will Katz here that's pinch hitting for Christina while she's taking some leave right now. That can also stand for questions. So with that, I'll hand it off to the commissioners.
Thank you. Commissioners who would like to start with questions?
So, good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm curious we talked a little bit about this last year, Will. This is a question for Small Business Development Center. And by the way, when you have the mic on, go ahead and introduce yourself also for any listeners, please. I'm curious just to understand a little bit more from your perspective about what other counties or cities funding looks like. We've historically had it as a pass-through here through the chamber. So this is the first time you've requested it directly, which I, for the record, think makes sense to me. It's a lot more clear and distinguishable, but I'm just curious how it compares to other counties and municipalities, or if it's kind of a mixed bag from your perspective.
Oh, hit the green button or the button and they'll turn green.
Oh, how about that? My name is Will Katz, and I'm the interim director of the KU Small Business Development Center. Commissioner Reed, that's actually an excellent question. My observation is that it really is a mixed bag. I mean, every community handles this differently, and not just here in Kansas, but as you may or may not be aware, there are almost 1,100 SBDC offices across the country in all of the states. You know, anywhere you go, you're going to be within a couple, 3 hours of an SBDC office, and the way that they're funded always makes use of the cooperative funding model, but the specifics of how that model is executed vary wildly from place to place. So yes, this is the first time that the center has made the request direct. And I agree, I think it does make some sense. You know, we are also grateful partners of the Lawrence Chamber, and they have handled that as a pass-through for us for my time as director was 2006 to 2021, and for that 15-year period, they handled it. It took some time off of our plates, and for that I'm grateful. I think Christina Edwards, my successor and the current director, has kind of leveled up everything that the center does. I mean, I recognize, I'm just proud of everything she's done. She's awesome. She's done great work across the board, and I think this is just another example of her kind of pushing things forward.
Yeah, thanks, Will. I appreciate that. And I concur. I think Christina has been, I didn't get to experience working with you directly, so I really experienced Christina through the e-community and have been really blown away with the work of the small but mighty team of Christina, Christian, and Carrie. So I really appreciate that explanation. I just kind of wanted to get grounded in what your perspective, having that long view, especially while you're here with us. So thanks for that.
Well, thanks for being here. What When I say the Economic Development Corporation of Douglas County, what does that mean to KU? What does that mean to the KU Small Business Development Center?
EDC is another organization that, I mean, they're our roommates, right? Like they share space with us. We collaborate with them all the time, every day. Talk to Joshua or Steve. I mean, they're important to us for a variety of reasons. We collaborate on, for example, the Diversified Douglas County Loan Program and just a number of other issues, just general kind of communication about, the ecosystem or specific businesses that might require assistance. So there's just a lot of collaboration in a lot of areas.
When it comes to the goal setting of your organization, the action steps that you take, do you look to EDC? Do you look to the county commission? Do you look to e-community? Like, how do you determine what the economic development goals are and what role?
Yeah, so I'm just an interim director. Come on. No,
Sorry.
Actually, that's a good question. I think I could probably speak for Christina when I say all of the above, frankly. Importantly, we are part of a state network, America's SBDC Kansas, and so there are, 6 other regional centers and 8 other kind of smaller center types, and they're managed at the state level by a state director, and so that's important to our kind of strategic vision. So we had a state director turnover since I left, and in fact, his last week was about 3 weeks ago, but he had kind of pushed this notion of like, okay, we're doing great work, we're helping people, but let's help more people. And so there was a little bit of a focus on not just the impact, not just the dollars of capital expenditure, but not just the jobs created, but also just the customer service aspect. Let's just bring more people in. Let's encourage this as an ecosystem. And so I think Christina has responded to that strategic initiative, certainly. But there's always room. Again, there are 1,100 SBDCs across the country, and it's a model that I think works really well. I mean, I've been gone for 3 years. I still consider it my life's work and probably always will. And I think the model is really good. And one of the things that works about it is that it allows for almost unlimited local flexibility. So at the center level, Christina has the opportunity to make strategic decisions that reflect what's going on with all of the partners.
Okay.
And partnerships like with Haskell, I think most recently the development of the Small Business Center that's going to be there on campus.
Correct. And I don't know enough about that probably to speak to it, but that's a good example, yes.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think you all know this, but we have built the SBDC into our processes as an e-community. Any loan that goes to the e-community to review, it has to go because we designated it as part of our process, that it goes through them to bless it, so to speak. And sometimes it doesn't make it past that point, but sometimes that's a good thing because that's giving it's really a holistic approach to supporting these small businesses. And I spoke to someone just yesterday that had been working with Carrie for several months, and she's not quite there yet, but she's working towards that. So we could not do entrepreneurship support in Douglas County without the SBDC. They're doing so many things. I don't know what it would look like here. I don't think we'd have any support for it if we didn't have the team that we have there.
I don't know if I'm supposed to comment on that, but thank you.
It's true. I didn't realize it the first couple of years that I was in the role, but now, I don't even think twice about just how important they are.
The first couple of years you were in the role, they didn't have quite as good of a director.
I just didn't know what I was doing.
So Jill, I would ask the same question for e-community. Like, it sounds like there's Will talked about there's a state level of directors for small business development centers. I think I heard you said that there's a state level expectation for e-communities through Network Kansas as well, right? What role does the Economic Development Corporation of Douglas County play in setting a goals, agendas, action steps for you?
I mean, I think just what we all know about economic development in any community is entrepreneurship, small business development is core to it. I mean, and that I'm not an economic development person, but I think like it is. I'm married to a small business owner. I get to work with enough small businesses, and Holly can certainly talk about that work in Eudora. But I think they are one of the best economic development resources that we have. How we cultivate, and that's why Network Kansas, our partner with eCommunity, who's also very closely aligned with the EDC or with the SBDC. That's why they're so closely aligned with the SBDCs across the state as well. And I think Network Kansas's alignment with the SBDCs is a testament to that. When you think about the larger alignment with the State Department of Commerce.
If I could comment on that briefly, the history of Network Kansas goes back about 20 years. And for many of those years, the state ASBDC director also had oversight responsibility for Network Kansas. So there's specific reasons that we kind of grew up as peas in the same pod, so to speak.
What's been the relationship then with the Eudora Chamber as far as being able to provide small business support? And I know, Holly, if you want to introduce yourself also, and you're overseeing some changes in the Eudora Chamber. Has there been any overlap with the SBDC?
Hi, my name is Holly Joyce. I'm representing Eudora Chamber of Commerce. And yes, when I joined, just a conversation that was in place to talk about resurrecting the Eudora Chamber of Commerce. One of the first things we did was reached out, Carrie Poe, small business SBD, yes, and sat down, had numerous conversations with her about what direction state resources, local resources. It was very instrumental in the core board, I guess, at the time to decide that this was something that was much needed in that community and supported with agencies locally. That's also how we got involved with ECOM, in that was just the awareness of entrepreneur small businesses, which of course exist in Eudora, that had never been on the radar, I guess. And so I was the one that started attending those meetings as well. In fact, Eudora is hosting that meeting next month, but I think it's become a collaborative, the ability, I think, just to reach out to agencies that have never been done in the past.
Are there other of our economic development partners that have been kind of useful in that conversation as you're restanding up the Eudora Chamber?
Lawrence Chamber, I think in the beginning was just going to a lot of Baldwin Chamber of Commerce, Eudora Chamber, or Lawrence Chamber of Commerce, DeSoto, just to look at different models, look at networking opportunities, and just look at the resources that they're being able to utilize. We had our ECOM meeting in Baldwin. That was the last one. I think just the collaborative effort of sitting around the table and hearing all of these agencies and what they have to offer to not just business owners in Eudora specifically, but students, high school, younger people that are up and coming with that desire.
Yeah, Carrie has been, had some really intentional meetings with the Eudora School District recently too. And Holly, you may have been involved in some of those, just trying to reinvigorate our partnership with Eudora, just for, participation in the Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge, things like that. But Carrie's been really involved in that, I know.
Commissioners, other questions for these two partners or other partners from our economic development group?
Commissioner Kelly, I'm going to jump in. Holly, thanks for being here. Good morning. Can you talk to me a little bit about the Eudora Visitors Bureau, or Convention and Visitors Bureau. Just in term, I'm curious if they're an example of an organization that the Eudora Chamber has worked with previously, or that has, in the time that the chamber was not high functioning in the last couple of years, but if there's been some activity going on there that you see as sort of a natural connection point.
Yes, I think originally when I went over and sat with just basically friends and was talking about ideas, I live in Lawrence, I'm in Schwegler Neighborhood Association, involved with that. It just became these conversations about, you're a community, you're going to have growth. And so we started discussing. The first meeting involved members of the Convention Visitors Bureau. And so that was very collaborative in that members of both CVB, excuse me, and the Eudora Chamber of Commerce were at the table with small business meeting with Carrie Poe. And so it was kind of the idea. There is a split, however, because the CVB has very specific things working with the city, funding in that respect, and then the chamber set up their new board and mission statement just based on the chamber. But there are definitely collaborative efforts that are happening now in Eudora with both of them.
Thank you. And I meant to mention as part of my preamble to the question, City of Eudora specifically, and them as a funding partner for the chamber as well. Is that?
The city is not a funding partner for the chamber. They supply a small, I think it's $2,500 to the CVB. There is no funding that is given to the chamber directly.
Just out of curiosity, is that something that the chamber is considering continuing conversations about and asking for? Does that?
I think what they want, or what their hope is to be independent and partner with the city for maybe more of the events and state interest in Eudora, but that's in the future. So I really don't feel like I know exactly what the game plan is with the city.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Reed, because on our balance sheet, it does list. Yeah, so I just want to make that correction. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Clarity there, because that's not what we understood.
Okay. I hope I didn't mess up.
Yeah, we may just need to verify your submission, because it had
$11,000 each year from the city of Eudora.
Eudora does two major fundraisers that have sponsorship. And
we're talking about the chamber here, not the CVB.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So they do two major fundraisers yearly that have sponsorships with businesses, have money designated that is scholarship for students and teachers. They do this for the funding of those programs. So the revenue, I thought, is there? Okay, I have.
It's okay. Is the question, is it city support?
Right.
Like from the city
It may
of
come from the community of Eudora, but not directly from the government, from the city of Eudora. Is that what, I think I hear you saying?
Correct. Okay. So those are, so those are like. that's
So then
earned-
we need to modify this sheet, because when we say City of Eudora, we mean the government of Eudora City. So if you mean, if that is not the case, then we probably need to revise these forms.
Okay.
It would go under fundraising. The way that
Yeah.
I heard you describe it would go under fundraising.
And there's a separate line for that.
Okay.
Thank you for pulling that thread, Commissioner Kelly. I realized I had the wrong tab pulled up, so appreciate it.
Any more questions? I have a question for Peasley, if you all are okay. Kevin, I see you're here. If you could come on up, that'd be great.
You guys can, yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for being here. I think we have this conversation about every year, but we look at fund balance very closely, right? We have some partners who are very low on fund balance, and it creates concern for us. Are we funding an organization that can be sustained over time? And then we have others like Peasley, which has a very robust fund balance. I see that your unrestricted fund balance is slightly lower than your total revenues and slightly, I mean, maybe not slightly, but about 75% of your total expenditures. But your ending fund balance is over by $600,000 your total expenditures. Can you talk about, and there was some narrative in your packet about the different types of fund balances that you're keeping. Can you walk, I wasn't able to track it all, so.
Sure. Well, first we set a goal as we moved from never having any money to start having money of trying to build a one-year reserve fund for the operation. And so that's what we set off on, and that's what right now, I think there's 11 different accounts that support that, and those were the local banks that provided a mortgage to us. So I think that if you look at it in that aspect, we're probably we're just about on pace to meet that goal. And then, so, I mean, we didn't intend, it'd be great if it built forever where we could make an endowment out of it and help fund, which, is a longer term process where we can fund our RISE program, which is the Raise Income Security and Equity for Low-Income Douglas County residents. Ultimately, that would be a goal, is to have a fund that supports that every year. But we're a long ways from that. That would require a few $1 million to do that.
I think where Commissioner Kelly is coming from, and I had the same questions listed in mine, is that what's reported in here as the ending fund balance is actually greater than your total expenditures by about $600,000. And so it'd be more than a year's worth. Your narrative talked about that there are some investments in the building that were captured in that number, and that's what I'm trying to ferret out, like what is unrestricted fund balance and what is other kinds of like capital
Improvements and capital maintenance and building maintenance.
So
And we
that's
do
the part we're trying
have
to
some
get at.
expenses right now that we're incurring. For example, we're putting in a solar system, a 300 kilowatt system. Part of that is funded. Part of it was grant funded, but part of it is funded by Peasley through these funds. And we'll have a similarly next year, a large expenditure related to ground source heat pump system. Both of those things, long-term, are a good investment for us. But so, I mean, I think I hope I'm answering your question.
We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
I think those are great investments. They're also, as far as I can tell, not reflected in here, those expenses. I would assume they'd be under utilities and building maintenance if there's another spot, but nothing's jumping out as something that's kind of capturing those expenses.
And Kevin, you may just need to look at it and I line it out, and maybe not even, you might need to revise. I mean, I'm going to want a revised document.
Yeah, okay. Because, I mean, I didn't have this in front of me, so, okay.
And one of my other questions was that solar investment, which I knew was either happening now or happening shortly in the future, and where that was going to be reflected.
And I think also in part of this is the reflection of depreciation in the statements. I mean, that's part of what makes that number look like it is, because it includes the depreciation, which is a substantial part of it.
Right, and I think we're looking for unrestricted fund balance that is available for supporting the expenses of the organization. So, yeah, I think it'd be great to get a new copy of that kind of reflects those things. It's okay to pivot a little bit. Okay. So I know that Douglas County has also helped to pay off the mortgage and the building, and there's a balloon payment this year, and this is the last of that 200,000 that we will support that, and then it's done, right?
That's correct.
So we have, within the request, we've got the 200,000 that's been kind of our standard help to the operations of Peasley, and then that 200,000 will be the last year supporting that.
That's correct. On the mortgage, it's the last year. And, just related to this, our goal is to be self-sufficient, and our board is committed to it. And
We're glad to help.
And we're doing, and well, we wouldn't get there without the support that we've had from Douglas County. Of course, we wouldn't even be here without that, so.
Well, and it's a great organization, and we're really proud of it. The city of Lawrence also is on your budget as 200,000. Did they help with the mortgage at all, or is that only operations funds?
I think it's operation funds now, but I think in the first years of the mortgage, it was, the funding was allocated in such a way that it was being split between the two. But when we added the Crunch Center, and funding moved from the city to support the small business development activities that we do there.
But the amount had stayed the same, that
Yes.
200,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Just allocated differently. Commissioners, other questions? Okay.
I would like to mention one thing, because with Eudora, obviously there are a lot of exciting things happening there, but that's another part of our outreach in the county. Because of some unfortunate circumstances, they do not have a career and technical education program right now. And we are developing one to deliver to the Eudora High School students in the coming year. So.
Since I've got you here, Kevin, and we've got another minute or two, I think, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked KU Small Business Development Center and Jill and Eudora. Like, when you think about the Economic Development Corporation of Douglas County, what role does that group play in setting your goals, setting your action steps? How does it influence what our overall economic development plan is for Douglas County?
A few different ways. We are a partner in economic development activities as it relates to the recruiting of companies. So we work directly with the EDC when they're bringing, visiting companies in. They quite often are visiting us and talk about training programs that we can help support to bring those businesses in. The Economic Development Corporation also has helped in the past help fund the RISE fund as well. And so on an ongoing basis, it really is around business recruitment is what most of our work with the Economic Development Corporation is on. And that's, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's many times a year. And quite often they come through the EDC from the Kansas City Area Development Corporation, through the EDC to us about, again, helping identify support for potential businesses to come to our area.
And would it be fair to say not just support for potential business coming to our area, but also for those who are looking to expand, and not just expand their workforce, but also expand into another area? My experience sitting on the EDC is that Steve Kelly might come and talk to you, and you work together and go visit businesses together to identify what that workforce development support is. So it's an organized system. Is that?
Yes. And, a good example is the expansion of Berry. That was a cooperative effort with the EDC and meeting with them to get those, I think it was 90 jobs into the county, that expansion. And for our part, we're working with county businesses daily to meet their needs as far as for training.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know we are right about at that time, but I'd like to have the EDC come up and kind of respond to a similar question of how do you interact with other economic development partners, and how are you kind of leading the conversation on that?
Good morning. I'll kick it off and turn it over to Joshua. I'm Bonnie Lowe. I'm the president and CEO of Lawrence Chamber and also part of EDC. So how do we work with our partners? Is that your question, Commissioner? Very well. So we're so pleased to work very closely with Kevin Kelly, with Adam Courtney at KU Innovation Park, with Christina and Will and Carrie and Christian at the Small Business Development Center. And it goes beyond recruitment, it goes into entrepreneurship. And I liked your question, Commissioner Kelly, about going out and seeing the businesses. Steve organizes monthly meetings that includes our partners also at the city and the county and other areas to look at existing businesses. Although the part that gets the headlines as far as businesses are new ones coming in when they have hundreds of jobs and great payroll, and that's fun. But the business retention and expansion is part of what we are most proud of, and starting with entrepreneurs and helping them be successful and expand. So I hope that answers your question, Joshua. Do you have anything to add?
I just wanted to reiterate kind of what Jill had talked about, Will, about kind of that entrepreneurial system where we all work together, we know one another, we try to identify the needs of the entrepreneurs and get them those resources as quickly and seamlessly as possible. And a lot of that is, I've probably done that about 3 to 4 times just in the past week for entrepreneurs trying to get access to opportunities, trainings, other things. So I just wanted to emphasize and reiterate that point, as well as a close partnership with Peasley, KUIP, and others on a regular basis, I think through the cooperation of EDC partners.
And I'd quickly add that Adam and Kevin are on our EDC board, they're on our chamber board. I'm on the KU Innovation Park board and the Peasley board, so we get together very regularly and have detailed conversations.
Thank you. And I know we went past time. I don't have any other questions for economic partners. Do other commissioners have questions? So I didn't have any questions for KU Innovation Park either, but thank you all for being here.
Thanks for
Appreciate
the
it.
opportunity. Good luck with your hearings.
Right. Commissioners, do you need a break while we reset or keep going? I think I'd like to start with, yes. Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, if we could start with Conservation District and Extension, and then we'll do it in 2 phases, and then we'll bring up our heritage partners after that, just since we don't have that many seats at the table.
I don't have any opening comments. I'll let you all just get to questions if you have them.
Hold on a second, we've got some updated materials to pass out. We found it.
Okay. Thank you.
We want you guys to have that.
If you don't mind introducing yourselves and what organization you're with.
I'm Susie Mooney, Douglas County Conservation District.
And I'm Marlon Bates, K-State Research and Extension, Douglas County.
I'll start my questions with Susie, and thank you both for being here. In terms of the supplemental request, I know that the county allocation has been the $85,833 for as long as I've known about Conservation District, which was some time. So talk to me about the new position and salaries.
Is it working? Okay. All right. So the position isn't exactly new. We've had an education outreach coordinator in the past. We have not been able to fill that position because we have not been able to pay someone a decent amount that they would accept for such a position. And since we've had so much new policy pertaining to urban agriculture, we thought what we would do is make the position strictly a youth education coordinator and add the urban aspect to that position. So they wouldn't be doing all of our education and outreach like they had in the past. I would still do the adult, but I'm only one person. And last year, we did 19 events with youth and adult. Unfortunately, only 3 of those were youth. And it's because there's only one of me. So,
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for Conservation District?
Hi, Susie. Thanks for being here. So I'm interested, I did not have a chance to look up law KSA 2-1901, but I'm interested to understand what the limitations on that law, and here's my point. 76% of your budget comes from Douglas County. And while I see in your narrative, you're aggressively looking for funding, what I see on your budget sheet is a budget of about $2,000 worth of braided funding into that total. So what I'm trying to figure out is when I look at what the organization does, there are many overlaps with our sustainability department. And I'm trying to understand why we need a Douglas County Sustainability Department and a Douglas County Conservation District. And is there legal ramifications that say they don't work together, can't be supported together?
the Douglas County Conservation District is authorized to use the state cost share funding to help farmers put conservation practices on the ground. So what I do is I actually go out to farms, I speak with farmers, we go over what they're doing. A lot of times, certain things I will refer to K-State Extension Office for more information on some things. They've been very, very helpful to us. However, the Sustainability Office cannot do that. Our state funding, we just got notice that may be increasing, hopefully, depending on a bill that still needs to be signed. So if that increases, that'll be great. But it is unsure at this time. We have applied for more grant funding. However, I have not gotten replies on that as of yet. One of the programs that we participated in this past year was to put cover crops on the ground, and they did put in a 50-cent per acre for the conservation districts, and I got the first check for that yesterday. So that's why that's not on here yet, because it'll be on the next one. So we are looking for other ways to increase funding for our operations. It is, like you said, I mean, there's sustainability, there's all these other groups. So getting donations and private funding locally is a little difficult sometimes. The money on here is, so the donations are here locally, $1,000 donations. And then the grant that's on there was a state grant that we used for an education and opportunities. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you for that. To follow up, you mentioned before that some policy updates focused on urban farming and urban outreach specifically had taken place. Can you just flesh that out a little bit more about what you mean, where those policies came from? Maybe they're unfunded mandates from the state or?
So we work in partnership with NRCS and the FSA. NRCS is currently undergoing a complete overhaul of their urban funding opportunities. So there's a huge list, and not all of the things on that list have been completely established by NRCS yet as far as the rules for that funding. So as those come out, we want to get them to the community as quickly as possible. NRCS does rely on the conservation districts to facilitate information to the public. So that is one of our roles. And I believe it's stated in here, since we partner with NRCS, they do provide us with our office and some of our supplies, not all of our supplies, but a few things. So we don't have to rent an office because of our partnership with NRCS.
I just want with the NRCS partnership, and I see like the conservation technician, which that was a position that used to be supplied through NRCS, but housed in Conservation District, and I remember that was a somewhat complicated relationship. But I see that it's not here for 2025. Did that partnership or that funding go away?
So our technician was hired on permanently with NRCS, which was a good opportunity for him. However, that did take it away from the district. So we do not have a district-funded technician right now. We did apply to the Division of Conservation for another technician. However, they said at this time, they are not going to fund another technician, but we're on the list, so.
Because they thought the need was filled with the one at NRCS, or just money being short?
Well, since our office is the administrative office for the whole area, we have, the NRCS office has 6 counties underneath it. So they do think that it's partially facilitated through NRCS. However, his time is going to be divided, and not as much time is going to be allocated just to Douglas County, which is why we petitioned, so.
I appreciate you following up on it. I can see how we're losing out with the change. I interrupted a question that you were going to have. Okay, now that's all I have for Conservation District. Commissioner Kelly? Okay. So Marlon, there's a fair number of new requests with your budget. Do you want to just kind of talk through those for
Sure thing.
starters?
Absolutely. So the Executive Board of the Douglas County Extension Council thought long and hard about the budget request for 2025. You'll see those enumerated in a numbered list on page 12 of our budget request. So you'll see a 3.2% cost of living adjustment for our current staff, some pay equity issues that need to be addressed, 2 full-time summer interns, which would be a continuation of some Kansas Department of Education grants that we've received over the last few years, including this year, to staff interns in our office to help with the outreach in the summertime, specifically to youth around the areas of STEM and health. There's number 4 is a contribution to Live Well Douglas County Executive Director position. That's a position that we've been able to secure through Blue Cross Blue Shield Pathways to a Healthy Kansas funding for the last 4 years that's coming up. And in order to keep that position in place in 2025, we are $15,000 short. We feel like that's an important element of this request, given their work, that organization and that executive director's work on the community health plan. The number 5 is sort of a regurgitation from last year. We asked for a full-time receptionist. Last year, you kindly provided sufficient funds for us to make that a half-time position, so we're seeking that to be a full-time position. Again, and increased benefit expenses, and then just some sort of non-personnel line item adjustments to fall in line with expectations and what our realities have been over the last several years.
Can I start with the 2, the summer interns and the Live Well that were grant funded and now looking for another way? Are there other presumably those grant opportunities are not available anymore? So
Correct.
are there others that you're actively pursuing?
Well, not actively pursuing. We've got our eyeball on one opportunity. So the Pathways Project through Blue Cross Blue Shield, they've been pretty tight-lipped about what their plans might be philanthropically in communities, but we do understand that there may be an opportunity for another option for Pathway, or for something like Pathways for Live Well Douglas County to apply. But details remain unseen on that front. And so that's not hearsay. We know that they're going to do something. We just don't know what. And we intend to apply as we did 4 years ago for the Pathways Project. The funds from KSDE were federal COVID funds, and those monies are gone, exhausted after this round of interns.
Can you talk a little about Live Well Douglas County and when it got connected with Extension? Because I think it's housed out of Extension now, but it wasn't always. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. I'd say the connection has endured since the beginning of Live Well. Over a decade ago, the Douglas County Community Foundation secured funding from Kansas Health Foundation in order to create a coalition dedicated to community health here in Douglas County. That work was largely done out of Lawrence Douglas County Public Health up until about 2019, 2020. Conversations with then Director Dan Partridge and I really just kind of looked to identify where the critical infrastructure and the sort of backbone support for that coalition might reside in the future, given their moves. And so they were through conversation with the leadership of that coalition and other organizations that have been involved with the coalition through time. We approached the executive board of the Douglas County Extension Council to put forward this grant application for Pathways, which was going to provide the funding for housing its first executive director, dedicated staff, which was the number one priority that had been identified in early 2020 by the coalition for furtherance of their cause. What they decided was they needed an executive director. We went and found both the money and a willing host organization, and that host organization is the Extension Council has been for 4 years.
So Live Well, it's a separate organization, or is it just a program that is now housed, used to be housed under public health and is now housed under Extension?
Yeah, it is not an organization in that it has a 501c3 or any other IRS designation. It's a coalition that's, well, there's a term for that. It's slipping my mind, but it's an undesignated program, basically.
And the other funding partners for that currently are who else is
So
funding?
the Lawrence
Live Well?
Douglas County Public Health and Douglas County Community Foundation.
Are still ongoing funding partners with that.
Correct.
Thank you. Commissioners, what do you have?
So Marlon, currently the county funds 65% of the budget, right? And the supplementals that you asked for are 71,000, which is an 11.8% increase. We have seen a 6.89% increase in valuations. So my question to you is, as I look down your list of requests, I understand the COLA request because it comes from a place where we're your major funding source. What is the biggest priority here among the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 requests that we have? Because at 11.8%, as a commissioner, I'm worried about sustaining that kind of financial expansion.
I understand. Thanks for the question, Commissioner Kelly. So I've thought a little bit about that question, and I've had conversations with our budget committee, and we feel that the combination of numbers 1 and 2, so the COLA and equity issues, amount to about $23,000. We think that's a top priority. We also feel like the $15,000 for the contribution to the Live Well Douglas County Executive Director is also a top priority.
That's helpful, thanks. I tried to look in your narrative for more about increased employee benefit expenses. Can you tell me more what that is?
Sure thing. So we're expecting that with the, well, let me make sure I'm speaking correctly about this. So our expectation is that the things that aren't already listed, right? So if you look at the COLA, there's not just the wage, there's also the benefit piece there. And the same is true with the increase to the receptionist. So what this would mean is we're simply talking about the increase in expected expenses on existing staff as we're staffed today.
And that's my question for Sarah, is would we include that in our, since those benefits are paid by the county, is that?
That's not what my understanding was. Go ahead,
Right.
Marlon.
So that's not what we're talking about.
Okay.
We're not talking about the county paid. So
I think this is if they make the receptionist position full-time, it will receive more benefits. Then those will become a responsibility of the county. That's how I interpreted it from the information that was provided.
Well, so those numbers are in number 5. So I believe Commissioner Kelly is asking about the number in.
6.
Yeah, in
Yes.
number 6.
So what does that come from?
So some of our employees are on the county health benefit plan, and that number is in the budget.
Okay.
And that was the number that was provided by the county for 2025. The number that you're seeing here in number 6 is for the employees whose benefits are with the university. So we have, some of our employees are jointly employed by the university and the Extension Council.
You got to say it out loud. Which university?
I'm sorry, Kansas State University. And so, thank you for that. So those employees, so the Kansas State University participates in the benefits of those employees at the same rate they participate in the salary. And so that's not the same across the board. So, you know, that number is for those employees. It's like, I believe Commissioner Willie mentioned complicated when she was talking about some of the relationships with the NRCS. And
So I think what I understood you to
similar.
say was these were the benefits for the K-State employees, not for the Douglas County employees.
the ones that are jointly employed by K-State and Extension Council,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Marlon, can you help me just, the narrative didn't quite get me there to understand what your distinction is between the COLA and the pay equity. And yeah, just help me understand why that wasn't one sum number.
You bet. Yeah, so we've always done analysis across the system, the K-State Research and Extension system, regression analysis of years of experience, education level, and salary. And so we have a good sense of where our agents lie within their sort of cohort of folks that have the same level of education and same number of years of experience. And so sometimes there are discrepancies. And so when we make adjustments to bring an employee back into line with that regression analysis, that's an equity adjustment as opposed to a cost of living adjustment.
Got it, thank you. And can you tell me how many employees that represents?
One.
One, okay. Out of, tell me what your total number of employees are. Sorry, it is probably in here, but if you have it off the top of your head instead of me.
13.
13 total, thank you.
Sorry, now I understand a little less. But that one position is what's caught between your first and second request there?
No, so the second request is an equity adjustment for one employee.
Got it. Okay, I understand now. But those first two requests that you've labeled as kind of the highest priority, are those for agents that are kind of jointly employed, or are those for the Douglas County employees, or both?
Both.
Okay. All right.
One quick question for Sarah. On our budget sheet, in the notes column next to Live Well, it says $99,972. Was that
Same
something?
question.
Just a typo, okay.
Commissioners, do you have other questions for these partners, or can we bring our heritage partners forward? Thank
Bring
you so
on the
much.
heritage partners.
Thank you for
Thank you,
being here.
Commissioners.
Commissioner, I think you're still working from the old.
Yeah, I am. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
I got 2.
Can I say one more thing I forgot? I'm not sure if you got it, but we have a couple of letters in support of that position.
You can get
were they
those
in
to
the
Sarah.
Okay, I will get
Yeah, we
those.
specifically were trying to not have letters. You guys told us not to include letters of support this year, so I'm trying to follow the rules. So that's
you.
all right. But you can give them to us now if you want, and we can pass them along.
All right.
Come
I
on
don't
up,
know how we fit-
Caitlin.
I don't know how we fit everyone at the table.
We'll squeeze in. Pull some chairs up.
And Caitlin, are you going to give us a start? All right, I'll let you do that while people are getting settled.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for having us. I'm Caitlin Amerlin, the Heritage Conservation Coordinator for Douglas County. And so we're joined today by representatives of our Douglas County Heritage agencies that are funded through the budget process. We've got representatives from Douglas County Historical Society, Clinton Lake Historical Society, Lecompton Historical Society, Eudora Area Historical Society, and Santa Fe Trail Historical Society today here with us at the table. And yeah, so they're here to answer your questions on the budget. And then as well, we have the Heritage Conservation budget for your consideration here too. So I'm available to answer questions on that. There's 3 supplemental requests presented among the Heritage agencies. The first one follows in the same pattern of last year of the collaborative funding request. The second one is for a one-time request for Douglas County Historical Society for a collections assistant. And the third is for Santa Fe Trail Historical Society. And so we're here to answer your questions in whatever order you so choose. So thanks.
I will start with the second one because that seems logical. So this is the part-time or the temporary collections assistant, and it's half of the cost. So where's the other half expected to come from?
We have a donor who.
Just say your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Steve Novak from the Douglas County Historical Society. And we had a donor come forward offering half of what it cost over a 3-year period to fulfill that position. And it was contingent on us being able to raise that other half. There's an opportunity to pursue grants to fill out year 2 and year 3. We're kind of caught in grant cycles for 2025. Some good opportunities lie with federal grants. I have an open federal grant that closes this year, which means I can't apply until that grant is closed, which means that the earliest I could receive any funding would be the end of the year in 2025. So I didn't want to run the risk of losing that potential donation, especially one that considerably large, by asking him if he'd push it off another year. Plus, this is work we need to have done and are trying to get done with just a part-time position right now. And when the work is done, it'll be done and the position will end.
So the 3 years is kind of the life cycle of the need as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the issue is that record keeping at the Watkins Museum has not been up to professional standards. And for us to move forward, we really need to get a handle on that. And there's 50 years worth of stuff to look through. It's a big project. And the way to get it done and behind us is to have someone focus on it full time for a limited period of time.
So this position or this request is listed as being for all of the Douglas County Historical Society, or this is not a joint request. This is
Correct.
just.
That's
from
just the request for the Watkins Museum, and it's a one-time request for 2025.
Okay, sorry, I misread that. I appreciate the clarification. Any other questions on that position? Okay.
It's helpful for us. We weren't clear on that either, Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry. Although by having this position fixing our problems, it does make our curator available to assist other organizations if issues come up.
Is that something that the other partners are aware of or know kind of what they will get out of that?
Yes, we've talked about what their needs are.
Okay.
And it varies, but we're available to help.
So the first supplemental request, this one is a shared
Yes.
request, okay? And it's not so much shared as it's one request, but everybody has a piece in it, right? And these are our occupancy costs.
Yes. What we did was look across our budgets and determined that in liability and property insurance and utilities were something that we all experienced, with the exception of Eudora, which is why Ben has bowed out of this joint proposal, and looked at the experiences we've been increasing over the past 5 years and identified this amount based on that increase and what we expect to see in the future.
And the Eudora, that's because the city of Eudora provides your building?
No.
And start with your name.
I'm Ben Terwilliger with the Eudora Area Historical Society. Our building is owned by the Historical Society itself, which is a 501c3 organization. However, we don't pay taxes on it because we're a nonprofit. We don't have any debt from the restoration of it, and then our operational budget is paid for by membership dues. I'm an employee of the city of Eudora, and the city of Eudora provides the majority of funding for my position. Then Douglas County provides some funding, but we didn't have that similar of a need for an increase in that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions about that particular request?
Yes, thank you. And I'm not sure if this goes to Caitlin or to Steve or to whomever, so anyone just take it away. So for the combined organizations, and I didn't pull out Eudora, it's the information you gave us, it's about 24% of your overall budget comes from Douglas County. This number that you're requesting here for occupancy cost, utility, and liability insurance, is that 24% of the overall cost or 100% of the overall cost?
That number was based on 100% of the total cost.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a question probably for Caitlin. And this was data, I appreciate you providing the data, like what percentage of the organization's funding comes from the county and such, or maybe that came from Sarah, sorry, give credit. Because this was a little bit of math that I did on my own last year to start looking across the board. And I know each of these organizations is very different from each other, which, just as a side note, I very much appreciate the partnering that goes on with it. I mean, knowing that they're also kind of coming to the table with very different organizations overall. But when you look down the list, you say, well, how did we get to the percentages that we have, and are these the right allocations?
We didn't. I mean, those were decisions of the Board of County Commissioners at the time those requests are reviewed. So there's staff really has not necessarily standardized them in any way. Those are completely up to the Board of County Commissioners.
I just wonder if that's a discussion that the partners themselves might have amongst each other at some point. And that's not for the purpose of harming any of the organizations, but just for the looking across that we're not choosing which communities we love most, right? So, and granted that the needs are different and the programming is different.
That is something that we've started to look into just by tracing the history of the relationships between each of our organizations and the county, because the funding agreements happened at all different times and because of all different sorts of circumstances. And that tracking that is the first step to working with Caitlin to really looking at what would be the most sustainable model that most fairly serves the whole county moving forward.
Yeah,
So it's a process we kind of started.
Yeah, I just agreeing with Steve. I think the foundation is sort of laid for an overall look at all of that. And that's been raised as a priority that I think will be well poised to start taking on. All this collaborative work has really led to a real solid discussion and a overall view of it that we hope to continue to work on.
But I think some direction from the commission would be helpful in terms of if there's room for an increase in funding, because I think that's the kind of information the group would need.
Well, and I want to thank this group, because when I first came on the commission, it was a whole collection of, and you have worked together. I was sort of disappointed to see separate requests for Watkins and Santa Fe Trail, because that's sort of going outside of the progress that we've made, but understand that sometimes that's the way it needs to go. But I appreciate your question, Commissioner Willie, and want to recognize the progress that has been made to date to try to start to address that. I do think in some of our deliberations, it would be good to have some conversations. We have a couple of historical societies, historical locations here who are in some serious financial trouble. And we need to have some conversations about those as a board and what support, if any, and to what level we want to provide, because without our support, some of these may not exist much longer.
Yep, and those are conversations I'm eager to have, and eager to have partners at the table for some of those conversations. I think one of the ones we're talking about is Blackjack Battlefield, and that's they've been out there fairly public with those needs. So I think there's some conversations that may come back to us in the fall. Is that, or sooner?
Yeah, Carrie's online from Blackjack Battlefield, so if you have any questions specific for them. But yeah, we've been having some ongoing conversations just among the partners as well, and so the county's been involved in those, and we can definitely bring it back in the fall as sort of resolutions come from that.
And as I look down the list too, and like how different some of these are, I also look at like the Clinton Lake Historical Society, which was formed because of a massive disruption to communities, which is different from some of the others who are cataloging communities that either still exist or have faded but not been like forcibly removed in the way that Clinton Lake has. So. Which also brings me to another question. Somewhere in your commentary was talk about working with the Haskell Cultural Center, but then it wasn't in part of any of the requests. So just what's that relationship and how are the conversations going?
The relationships have been right now making exhibit-based partnerships and relying on Travis Campbell, who's the permanent director of the site, to serve in an advisory capacity for us for projects that we're working on. We've also been in discussions with him about supplying volunteers to help support open hours at the Cultural Center. That position for us is we've made some changes in how we've planned to staff the museum in order to create a position that has responsibility for building a volunteer base. And when that position is online, hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll be able to really start building and recruiting more volunteers that can help at all of the sites. So we're moving forward there, but we haven't gotten to the point of tangible benefit yet.
Okay, and that's why they're not included in that kind of joint request.
Correct. Plus, the joint request really focused on just those two occupancy expenses because it was something that ran across ran across all of our organizations. The Haskell budget is a little trickier because it's a part of the university, which is a part of the federal government, which, yeah.
And I think there's something to pick at between Freedom's Frontier, and the large number of organizations that they support. There was one narrative in here that said there's no grant possibilities available at all, and I was surprised because then I looked at Freedom's Frontier and these are the ones that they're funding. So in some way there's some sort of disconnect there with, and I think that's maybe a further conversation, is like, what is Freedom Frontier's role in sort of facilitating larger conversations amongst partners, because then it does, now we're federal and it has a different role there. So not to solve today probably, but something for us to consider to think about.
For the Santa Fe Trail request, we have an additional request there, and I know that our funding for Santa Fe Trail is and has been always pretty minimal. There's also been some difficulties there with circumstances around. Maybe you'd want to elaborate in terms of like what's the trajectory of the organization.
Roger Boyd with Santa Fe Trail. Well, our major issue has been our major funding in the past has been from the railroad, which is no longer functional. And I don't know that we have a trajectory yet. That's our problem. We don't have another source of funding.
And that it's showing negative fund balance all the way through for many years. Is that just based on money owed or debt, or what is that? And if you need to look on with Commissioner Kelly's copy, you can.
It's based on legal fees that we paid to deal with Midland Railroad and evicting them from the depot. We have some of that funding that we believe will be coming from the entity that claims to currently own the railroad. We have no leverage to force them to pay us, but we believe that some of that funding will come to us. We have two donors that have pledged to pay down another 30,000 of that, and the remaining of it was funding that we had in CDs, and we probably will just have to forfeit. We don't owe it as such, we just lost it.
You said you have a donor that's pledged. Is that in your budget as an anticipated income?
Well, it's not one large bunch, it's 10,000 per year. So I believe I have 10,000 in the budget for next year. No?
We don't. We only have 3,000 for contributions.
Okay, so I think probably what I did was put it into the, yes, line called legal fees refunded.
Anything else you'd like to say about the supplemental request?
I don't believe I do at this time.
Is there any reason why it wasn't part of a conversation with the larger group here, or was it? It says in lieu of the collective operations increase for historic partners.
Well, we've always included that in the conversations, it just never went anywhere.
And I don't know if this would be a question for Carrie or a question, Caitlin, about the future and trajectory of the Blackjack Battlefield Trust. It's a fairly small request, but we have been holding our partners to a high standard for financial health, financial transparency, and for taxpayer dollars. It's an important role. Can you talk about what would that 9,737 accomplish within the organization at this point?
I can start, and Carrie, if you're in and want to add anything, but basically we're working right now with them directly and with Douglas County Historical Society and Santa Fe Trail and other groups to sort of sort out what their current financial situation is. And so basically, at least from my perspective, we're kind of holding that as support for the site itself, for Blackjack Battlefield as an important natural and cultural site in the county. But then we'll come to you as soon as there's a resolution there of sort of our recommendation for that funding at this time.
Yeah, and I'd just add, commissioners, there's time between now and 2025 when these funds would become available. If any organization is unable to complete the required paperwork in terms of their financial transparency and their agreements with the county, we won't be distributing any funds.
Okay, I appreciate that. I know the rest is in flux. Commissioners, do you have other questions for our historical and cultural partners? Oh, can I have the others introduce themselves? We had you sit at the table and just give us.
I'm Janet Faust with the Clinton Lake Historical Society.
Paul Baumar with Lecompton Historical Society.
Is there anything that other partners would want to add that we haven't asked about?
I might add something. We had a tourist come in from Baldwin, and they had just returned from Fort Sumter. And the tour guide at Fort Sumter was making an explanation of what happened there. And the gentleman from Baldwin was shaking his head. And so when the tour person was finished, he went over to the gentleman from Baldwin and asked him, "Why are you shaking your head?" And he said, "Well, the birthplace of the Civil War is not South Carolina, it's Kansas." And the gentleman replied with, "Well, if we tell them that, they won't come here." So Kansas is missing out on something.
Thank you. We've come to the end of our time with this and appreciate very much all of you being here and staying in conversation with each other and with Caitlin. So,
Thank you.
thank you. And our next group for 10:15 will be Public Works, Zoning and Codes.
Can we take a quick 5-minute break while we get them up to the table?
Yep, we'll take 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone.